Welcome to SNEV Podcast. Hello everyone, this is Nazanin and you're listening to this special episode of the SNEV Podcast. I'm so excited to announce you that SNEV held its second virtual conference this year with keynote speakers as well as poster presentations, oral presentations, and networking sessions. In addition to addressing the topic of extracellular vesicles in the conference, we had two keynote speakers discussing career development, which I believe are also very important to listen to. And this episode, it was my pleasure and honor to had a short interview with the keynote speakers and ask for their opinion on organizing virtual conferences, also their practical recommendations for students who are working on EVs and new to this field. I hope you find this episode useful, and you can follow us on all social media platforms such as Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn to stay updated on other SNEV events. You can also check out the recorded presentation of our keynote speakers on YouTube.
Hi everyone, I'm Antonia Reale. Everyone calls me Annie. I'm originally from Italy. This is where I completed all my studies. I completed my medical degree and I then became a medical oncologist. While I was doing my training, I came to Australia, and this is where I started my research journey, basic and translational research. And after having two children, and so after after a career break, basically, I decided to accept a PhD position. And this is where my journey with extracellular vesicles started. In the
context, this is interesting.
Yes, in the context of multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. And I did complete my PhD last year in October. I've been working as a postdoc since July last year, and always in the same lab where I'm trying to wrap up my PhD work. And my topic will be at the SNEV conference will be around understanding the role of EVs in this blood cancer, multiple myeloma.
Did you participate in our virtual conference last year as well?
Yes, I did participate to yours. That was the first conference, is that right? Last year? Yes, I did. I had a poster with oral. So I presented a poster and with a few minutes talk. Yeah, and it was basically the same topic, but obviously now I will have updates and so I can show some progress on my project.
What's your opinion on organizing virtual conferences?
This is a tricky question in the sense that I like conferences that are run in person, but obviously COVID has taught us that we can still do things and that we don't really need to be physically.
Oh, you prefer in-person ones?
I prefer conferences in person, I guess, like many other colleagues, but I do understand and appreciate, that what happened during COVID has taught us that we can still do things, and this has been, great. Nothing has really stopped, and we were still able to connect, to to show our work and to get feedback, and I think this is great. But obviously, where it is possible, I would definitely prefer in person. SNEV obviously is a society made of younger investigators, students mainly, so it is harder to get funding to travel, and you may have to rely on scholarship, and so this is a great way to get students going with such experiences. This is great, and absolutely you should keep going with this. for everyone involved is very important. It surely improves your knowledge, your experience, and it's a few of those boxes get ticked on you, which is good.
So, you think is networking better in person conferences than virtual?
You can prove me wrong because, SNEV was born, I think it was born during COVID. So,
Yes, exactly.
it's a great society. It has been, successful in organizing conferences, in networking, keeping people, colleagues connected. I assume that it has expanded the network, and this has been done all virtually. So, this is surely doable. In person, I think I've been attending several conferences when I was in Italy. I've been going overseas as well, from Italy, in Europe, and here I've been attending several conferences, and I've been going overseas again from Australia. So I have quite a bit of experience in participating in conferences, and I think that when you are attending in person, you have more chances to meet people that maybe virtually would have been harder to see, or you may go and look for posters, and you find the presenter next to the poster, and just by chance, you start chatting, you start discussing about your work, and then obviously that increases the chances that you keep that connection going. And also with the in-person events, you have also the social functions, the breaks where you have the chance to chat to people, or even just sitting one next to each other improves the chances that you can network. And obviously in a hall with many people, compared to a room where it's just you and your computer, it's harder, but SNEV is a great example that things can happen virtually. It can happen in a great way.
What are your expectations from this SNEV virtual conference? How can we improve it?
Yeah, very difficult question. I mean, there are so many things that can be done and improved always. I think it's so last year I did participate, and I appreciated. I remember you had organized, or the committee last year had organized a virtual event where we would be split in breakup rooms. And so I think that kind of format helps in generating active discussions, because it's smaller groups. You have a senior person attending as well that can guide the discussion or help and support this discussion. I must say I've been always pretty impressed by this community, full of great students or young scientists, with big knowledge, lots of critical thinking, asking amazing questions. I think I have not participated to one event where EV young investigators or students haven't been, very actively involved, and this is very nice. And I guess this comes from the great work of all the principal investigators, the senior, the head of the leaders. So that's really good. So I guess organizing such small discussions in breakup rooms, that is great. And I think I can't remember if at one point you could mix up with other rooms, or I think that was the scenario where at some point you would change the room. I think that was the setup, and I think that's a great way, and I would keep going with that format. And obviously involving more senior people, that helps in keeping the discussions active, and maybe guiding the discussion. Over time things can get stuck, or you may need someone to send you on the right path. But obviously, having said that, all these EV students are great. it's still important to have more senior people involved. I remember from last year that not many were attending. I'm not sure if it's because they weren't invited or senior people thought it was more an event that was more tailored for just for the younger
Yeah.
cohorts. So I guess sending invitations, direct invitations to all, leaders, group leaders, or senior principal investigators, I think it would be nice. I've suggested this also at our meetings that we organize locally. I feel that when we have a mix of young and senior investigators, it's better.
Yeah.
But otherwise, what else could I suggest? I'm not too sure right now. But yeah, I think, so breaking up in smaller groups and wherever possible. I understand that there will be obviously sessions where you have one presenter and the audience listening. But when it comes to discussions or to create discussions, I think it's good to break up in smaller groups. And then, yes, trying to engage more senior people.
Oh, they're all helpful for us. Yeah, thank you. What is your suggestion for students who want to enter this area?
I think, like with any other field, I believe that research is a great field, but we all need to be aware that when we do research, we need to be proactive in seeking for connection, for network, for collaborations. I don't think it's a job, or at least based on my experience, where you sit at your desk or at your bench and it's just you and your work. You need to have an open mind. You need to be willing to share your knowledge, but also to admit your limits and seek for help and support. And what I find amazing about the EV field is that I have seen so many amazing people, colleagues, willing to support each other. And I don't think that many other fields are like this. Seeing a very big interest in making sure that people connect and collaborate and support each other. And so everyone who is young or new to the field should be reassured that they will get support, especially if you seek for it. Obviously, this also depends on your group, your colleagues, your leader. And I'm sure, if you are part of SNEV, I'm sure you have a great example in your lab. So just keep, going towards, that following this path, just seeking connections, seeking for support, making sure that whenever you have doubt or you feel like you need someone to guide you, just don't be ashamed, don't be afraid to ask.
Thank you again, Annie. I'm so grateful to talk with you. If you want to add anything to wrap up.
I just want to thank you, SNEV, the committee, for inviting me, for giving me last year the opportunity to present my work through the poster with oral, and this year as an invited speaker. I feel honored. I'm here to support my peers, young investigators, regardless if they are students or postdoc. We are here to support each other, so that's why I accepted. And keep going with your great work. I'm amazed all the activities that you do. I'm sorry that I cannot participate to everything that you do, but I do follow on social media, and I'm always amazed by all the things that you are able to do and organize. This is very important for your career. So it's not just about doing experiments, which is very important. So don't lose your focus. But this complements very nicely your journey as a researcher and a scientist. So thank you for giving me this opportunity.
So my name's Naveed Akbar. I'm a new group leader within the division of cardiovascular medicine at Oxford. The group was established about 4 months ago, so it's still very new. And the focus of our work is on how endothelial cell-derived extracellular vesicles are released into the peripheral blood following injury to the heart, so mainly within patients having a heart attack. And what I've shown over the past about 6 or 7 years now is that these endothelial cell-derived extracellular vesicles that spill over into the plasma can rapidly localize to other organs, including the spleen. And there they're able to interact with both neutrophils and monocytes, and they cause mobilization or deployment of these cells to the peripheral blood. So a set of investigations that we did more recently was asking the question, how is this process coordinated? And so we were able to identify on the surface that there's enrichment for a glycoprotein called vascular cell adhesion molecule 1, VCAM1, and by employing CRISPR-Cas9 base editing we can delete that both from the parent cells and therefore from the surface of the EVs, and then we can abolish the response. So that was really exciting for us. We're showing that kind of ischemic tissues can liberate these extracellular vesicles into the peripheral blood. From other studies and from our own studies, we know that these correlate or track with the extent of heart injury in patients, and they also track with the extent of the mobilization response, the number of the immune cells that we see within the peripheral blood. So it was really pretty cool to show that. And so that was really exciting. So by deleting this one protein that we show that was enriched on the surface of the EVs, we could abolish the mobilization response. And so the talk specifically, I think it's in about a month's time, will focus on what we call the afferent signaling. So we've already shown that the EVs now mobilize the immune cells, and in 2 studies we have identified that an endothelial cell associated microRNA, which is present within the EVs, might be governing a priming or programming or transcriptional response within those immune cells before they get to the heart. And so I'll hopefully share some data with you on the effects of this kind of endothelial cell derived microRNAs and how they can alter monocyte and macrophage function.
I really look forward to hearing your complete presentation at the conference. It was so interesting for myself. Did you participate in our virtual conference last year as well?
I don't think I did, but I was very aware of it. I certainly encouraged our team members to attend. I think it's a great initiative. The wonderful thing and also the tricky thing with extracellular vesicles is that they're implicated in almost every single area of science. So whether you're working on single cell organisms or whether you're working on cancer, cardiovascular disease, and that's fantastic because it brings a really large group of people together to ask sometimes similar but complementary questions. But at the same time, that means that you've got colleagues who are on the other side of the world. And so I think the way that you have structured the conference to tailor to all the different time zones and then to have plenary speakers is fantastic. So no one feels that they're missing out.
What are your expectations from the SNEV conference this year?
I'm just really happy to be invited, so thank you very much.
Okay, I want to talk about more networking is better in virtual conferences or in-person conferences, because the SNEV is working virtually.
So I think there is a place for virtual conferences. I'm a naturally extroverted person, and so I like meeting people and I like going to conferences. And so I was recently at a conference in Denmark, and I was always given the advice when I was training that if you go to a conference and you have one meaningful conversation with someone, then it was worth it. It was worth the time and the investment. And I walked away from this conference with probably 12 new friends and colleagues, and I was like, oh, well, fantastic. But it's also one of the first conferences I've been to since we've got back into post-pandemic work. So I read a statistic the other day. It was on Twitter, and I can't remember who shared the information, but it was coming from someone who was at the ICEV meeting. And what I found troubling about it is that DPhil students or PhD students are spending up to 50% of their time in their isolation and their characterization methods. And that's a concern, because if you want to progress the field and move it on into our mechanistic knowledge or even to our diagnostics, as many of us are trying to push for, that's a huge amount of time where we're focusing on isolation methods and characterization. I'm not saying that it's not important. I'm saying that what we need to do is just to be a bit more efficient with how we approach it. There are limitations to all of the isolation methods that exist, and there's a huge amount of wealth of information on whether you're working with plasma or cell culture derived EVs, cerebral spinal fluid, and I think it's important really to engage with all that literature, to devise a protocol that is suitable for your laboratory, to undertake your isolation and your characterization, but to be aware that some people are spending up to 50% of their time doing this, and that's probably not a fantastic use of 50% of your PhD.
What happened that you ended up here, working on EVs?
How did I end up working on EVs? So my background, I'm a vascular biologist. I have an interest in how blood vessels function, both in health and then how they become diseased progressively over our lifetimes in a process called endothelial cell dysfunction and atherosclerosis. When I was an undergraduate student, the first research project I did was isolating blood vessels from rats and then looking at how they contract and dilate. And at that time there was an interest in using nanoparticles to target the vascular endothelium to possibly enable targeted drug delivery. And so, staying within the same group at that time, I then did a master's by research, and I learned how to synthesize and fabricate silicon nanoparticles in different sizes, different charges, and I observed the effect that they had on blood vessel function. Because if you want to use these things as a modality for delivering therapeutics, then we should really understand what kind of effect they have in normal physiology, and whether they might then promote a progression of disease or dysfunction. And so I really enjoyed that, and I came across a PhD opportunity in Scotland at the University of Dundee with a group called led by Faisal Khan, and they had a fantastic model where you didn't have to harvest the blood vessels from animals. You could use lasers to look at the response of the blood vessels in the skin, and then you could recover the animal, and therefore you can do longitudinal studies, and that was really exciting. And I really enjoyed doing that in vivo imaging, and we focused down on cell signaling cascades which were responsible for inducing vascular dysfunction in response to both dietary cholesterol and some genetic abnormalities as well. And so when I was about halfway through my PhD, I knew I wanted to continue with research, and I knew that I wanted to pursue a postdoc, and I also knew that I really enjoyed the nanoparticle work I'd done previously and the imaging that I was doing at that time. And so I reached out to a professor at Oxford called Robin Chowdhury, and I said, "Hi, I'd like to do a postdoc, and I think your lab would be a great fit for this." And my friends and my colleagues at the time thought I was a little mad, just sending a cold email to an Oxford professor, "Oh, he's never going to reply to you." But within a day he did, and at that time he was like, "Oh, let's jump on a Skype call." And so we did that. We had a nice conversation, and then he invited me down to visit the laboratory. And so I came down and met the team. And I remember when I did that, I was trying to figure out, oh, do they just invite everyone? And so I asked the question, and they said no. And I thought, oh, okay, well that's a positive. They're not just bringing me along because it's what they do for everyone who emails them. And then a couple of months later had passed, and we said that okay, we'll touch base again, because I was only really towards the end of my second year at that time, and that we would think about writing a grant together that would maybe then provide the support necessary to do a postdoc. But a couple of months had passed, and then Robin reached out to me. One of his senior postdocs was leaving their position, and he asked if I wanted to pick up the remainder of the funding, which was about 12 to 18 months worth of funding, in order to then kind of gather preliminary data for a subsequent grant. And so I tell this story all the time, because if I had never sent that original email, he wouldn't have known I existed, and therefore he would never have pointed the opportunity for the available funding at that time. So if you're thinking of going to a lab, or you want to work with someone, send them an email.
Yeah, how cool. Okay, now we know this. What do you want to do next?
What do I want to do next? So I've just received a British Heart Foundation Intermediate Fellowship, and so that provides 5 years of funding, And so in the immediate future, so between now and Christmas really, the team will grow quite rapidly. We have a postdoc joining in a couple of weeks, we have a PhD student joining in October, and what we are aiming to do is to ask a couple of fundamental questions. So we know that we get this enrichment of VCAM1 on the surface of extracellular vesicles, and now we want to know whether it can be therapeutically exploited. Can we engineer it in such a way that it would enable us to target particular cells following a heart attack, and whether we could then manipulate the inflammatory response to be more reparative, be more anti-inflammatory. And what we're also doing is that we know that these VCAM1 positive extracellular vesicles are liberated into the peripheral blood. Can we use them diagnostically? And so I'm working with some fantastic collaborators over in the US. The head of the lab is Professor Shannon Stott, and so we're using some microfluidics technology now to extract these extracellular vesicles and to see what their diagnostic potential would be within our really well characterized patient cohorts here in Oxford.
What do you see the EVs field in 10 years?
Difficult question. We're making such large strides at the moment. I think it's fantastic that we've come from knowing that these things have biological function, which were the initial studies showing that they carry kind of RNA molecules, that they can change the kind of responses in recipient cells. I think it's really exciting now that we're able to get down to single EV analysis, so we can say actually how many molecules are on each of these particles that I'm studying, whether it's coming from plasma or from a different source. And I think over the next 10 years, I think the high, what I call dimensionality of extracellular vesicles will be more appreciated. So we all focus on either the proteins or the lipids or the RNAs, because you have to pick a molecule in order to study and to focus your investigations in whatever your disease context is most of the times. But there are so many molecules which could have a biological effect, and I think what's really exciting, and I think will hopefully come out in the next 10 years, is looking at all of these molecules together. How are these things packaged, possibly to all signal to a particular pathway or to a process?
What recommendations do you have for a SNEV to better engage and bring together researchers?
I think you guys do a fantastic job already. I'm constantly seeing your events on Twitter. Recently you've had one which is on kind of pressures within the laboratory and how that can affect your mental health, and I think that's fantastic. I don't think we have enough conversations about how tough the academic environment can be for people doing PhDs, people doing postdocs, people doing other research positions within that. The experiments are tough. We're often asking big hypothesis-driven questions, and the experiments aren't always successful. So I think if you go talk to your colleagues, have a cup of tea, that's a great way to air out any kind of concerns that you have, and to keep that dialogue open, saying actually, you know what, we see these fantastic papers coming out all the time, but not every single experiment along the way was successful first time. It takes some refining and some pruning.
Yeah. If you want to add anything at the end.
Very excited to speak at the SNEV conference virtually. I think it's a fantastic forum. I hope it continues as people naturally move on in their positions in research, and I'm really excited to see how SNEV will be integrated into the independent international societies. So within the UK we have the UK Extracellular Vesicle Society, and we have members of SNEV who interact with SNEV, and so what I think would be fantastic is if kind of SNEV had a greater representation at those individual society meetings, so the more junior researchers can get to know each other, and then they can keep their connections together. And I say that because people who I met during my PhD at conferences, I'm still friends with now, and you know, I still catch up with them. We're still in contact, and so it really provides a fantastic kind of support network. Sometimes it's for research questions, sometimes it's just because you need someone to talk to who understands your field or is going through a similar thing.
Thank you again for accepting the request to record the podcast, and I'm really excited to hear a presentation at the conference.
Thank you so much for having me as well. My name is Daisy, and I'm a science visual communicator and illustrator. I'm now based in Sunnyvale, California, but I'm originally from Taiwan and New Zealand, so apologies in advance for my very mixed accent. And I currently work as a graphics journalist at Radar's graphics team. So mainly we're a team that create kind of graphic first stories and infographic designs with my focus in biological and environmental topics. And I've been kind of doing visual communication for the past 10 years. I first started in publishing, working at Scientific American and then later at National Geographic, and also had my own freelance business for a while working directly with scientists and educators. So it's been fun working with a lot of different really talented people throughout my career. Yeah.
Wow, your job is so interesting for me. I mean, I really like your job. Okay, I have to control myself. Tell us about the topic you will talk about in the conference. But just don't spoil it. I want to hear your presentation.
Okay, I will not I'll try not to spoil it so people will go. Teaser. Yeah, no, that will be a much longer presentation that I still have to prepare, so no spoilers. But yeah, no, it was great to be at I think it was a smaller conference that they hosted 2 years ago to talk a little bit about my work. But for this conference, I think I'll really focused on just kind of how to use the strength of visuals and storytelling and art, kind of these more creative ways to communicate complex science information, such as the really amazing research that you folks in academia and many of you students do. How do we share those with graphics to the public? And the talk will really be based on my personal experiences and learnings working in the space of science visual communication. And not to spoil too much about the talk, but I'll try to, reveal the curtains a little bit and walk through kind of some memorable projects, kind of to show like what goes into these beautiful graphics you see in magazines like Nat Geo to like more interactive, immersive digital stories that I now work for Radar's Graphics. And then I'll probably also share some examples about collaborating with researchers to create cover art for journal submissions, as I believe some of the audience may have that experience or probably would love that experience. So there's a lot of creative collaboration opportunities that can happen. Yeah.
I'm sure your presentation will be one of the most interesting ones.
Thank you.
Well, what's your opinion on organizing virtual conferences?
Opinion on virtual conferences. I actually, yeah, do really love virtual conferences, as it really allows just more people to participate and can just have like a more international audience. It becomes a lot more accessible. And I've personally really benefited from these virtual platforms throughout the pandemic, since I do a lot of visual work and it can be a little bit isolating. And it was really great to feel like you can still build a community without being physically together. So for example, there was a case when I joined this conference called The Outlier 3 years ago. That's a data viz conference. And it was fully virtual. And it was because of that that allowed me to connect with like other data viz practitioners from Asia and Europe, and I was able to even learn that there's incredible data viz scene in Singapore and areas that I didn't know outside of the United States. That was really amazing, and it was also there that actually made me realize like a lack of diverse voices and representation in the space that I work at and the media. Because most of the time we do visual communication kind of curated through the lens of more of a Western lens, and that kind of actually led me to start a passion project called Taiwan data stories with a Taiwanese fellow practitioner called Julia Janicki, which I virtually met at that conference too. So we started this project because I'm from Taiwan as well, just kind of a series of data viz stories all about Taiwan, like from boba tea to mangoes to like Lunar New Year foods, a lot about food. So that was really fun, and like it really wouldn't have happened if there wasn't this virtual nature of it. Yeah, yeah. So it was a really great experience, and I had a lot more opportunities throughout the couple of years to do that too.
So, in your opinion, is networking better in virtual conferences or in-person conferences?
That's a great question, and that would be like the only thing I do miss about real like in-person conferences. 'Cause I really do miss those like unplanned creative energy you have in person and the networking and genuine connection you have with like non-flat people. um, but recently I've kind of find a kind of happy balance going through more virtual experiences is that it is very encouraging that you can still form really close networking connections through these virtual platforms if you kind of um, put yourself out there. You just have to like, if you're not in person, you have to initiate those communications through whatever platform your virtual conference is using. So I met my collaborator Julia through there. We've never met in person, but we like I feel so close to her now, and that was all through virtual and through like a message on Slack during the conference that I was like, hey, like do you want to work together? And that initiated a lot of things. Another part that I felt was successful is that even though it's virtual, through these virtual networking, you can still possibly find people that lives close to you actually. And that was the case in the most recent conference I went for Outlier, where I found another visual communicator just living in Sunnyvale too, and I wouldn't have known that she existed. And we met at the virtual conference, but we had just like an afternoon boba like 2 weeks ago at my house. We met in person, so there's still opportunities for you to accidentally encounter people that you can meet up in person through these virtual platforms and kind of build communities within your local area that's more like in person. So that's been kind of like my way to find like the best of both worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like virtual conferences. They're so much more comfortable.
Yeah, I can wear your pajamas to the conference, right? It's great, yeah.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Daisy, do you have any experience on working with extracellular vesicles?
Um, I can't say my work is an extra like vascular work.
But you have a biology background, don't you?
Yes, it is. But yeah, I can't say I'm a specialization in that field. And in fact, when I got first invited to present, I thought it was electric vehicle, and I was like, why are they inviting me? I was a bit confused. I was like, sure, I like to share. So this is really not my expertise, but I have a background in biology in my studies, and it is true that I wanted to work in academia at first. When I went to Rice University, we're really close to the med center, and I'm always in lab, and I really loved that. But I realized like I wasn't really great at research. Like I always get like dilutions wrong. I hate writing papers, and I would go to all these conferences. Yes, never avoid it, but like at these conferences for these academia presentations, I realized like scientists are always like super excited about talking about their niche and presenting to each other, but like nobody is kind of sharing these super cool science to the public or in a way that the public can understand. And I love the visual work or like learning science through graphics when I see in textbooks. I love the creation of in combination of science and art, and that got me thinking, can I use my skill sets of doing illustrations and graphics as a way to bridge the gaps between like academia research to the public? And it was also my way to kind of not get too niche in a field in science. I love more broadly learning about biology and nature, and that's why I'm not a specialist in EV, and I apologize for that. I have drawn macrophages and cellular structures, but I love learning about like different nerdy things. I like never get bored, and be able to use my visual work to share the really cool science that researchers do to a wider audience and engage them. That's kind of how I like transition to the field of academia to like doing illustration and visual communication. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Tell us, what is your suggestion for students who are studying in this field? Who study graphic or who wants to enter this area?
Yeah. Actually, like I did started as a student doing this, like being very annoying to my professors. Basically, I feel like in the school environment as a student, it's a really great environment to test out your career or passion interests. Because the teachers want you to succeed. So essentially, I would ask my biology professors, like, can I draw some diagrams or illustrations for your paper or for your like tutorials? Can I draw your cover submission for like one of your journals? And oftentimes they're like more than excited because it's very uncommon for them to think like, oh, how can I use art or actually create quality artwork for my scientific publications, like compared to using PowerPoint or like more diagrammatic ways. So a lot of times I got those opportunities just being proactive and annoying to my professor, and it really worked out. Like when I was freelancing and even up till now, I still have a really good relationship with my professors there, and I still do work for them as a professional, and I learned a lot throughout that process if I do like that field. So I feel like if there are students out there are interested in a field, even if it's just like communication in general, or like it doesn't have to be visual, like start like working with maybe one of your publications in school, like doing the writing portion, like science writing is a great way to communicate. Or if you enjoy and want to figure out if art can be a part of it, working in like within your project. Maybe you're a postdoc student already doing a project, thinking through how can I be more intentional in designing my graphical abstract and putting in more graphic elements into your already in progress research works are really great ways to explore if you enjoy or want to be more serious about science visual communication or science communication in general. Yeah.
What do you see this field in 10 years?
Wow. I don't know if I'm qualified to determine the future of this field. um, so I guess you may be interested that like my title is a graphics journalist, like I'm actually in journalism. And that's actually quite, and yeah, I guess I never thought, because I was trained as a science illustrator, I never thought that I would be considered a journalist in the end. And it kind of does make sense, because what we are doing is we're creating stories and reporting on stories. So most of the project, I start off doing the research and reporting work, and sometimes even going to the field to work with researchers, which I'll also share all that progress during the talk. So I feel like in this space of visual communication, like it really is extending and thinking beyond that to the field of journalism. How do you put your all that distill all that information, become a reporter, and use very innovative and creative ways to tell stories? And in our field, really, right now, we're mainly experimenting ways in kind of how to use more creative visual formats to engage our audience. Because I think it's easy for us to get really excited about like a nerdy topic. Like my previous project was about explaining like why plants matter and how they use drone technologies to help plant conservation. And to me, it's super exciting. I want to know all the mechanisms of the drones, like what kind of land names these plants have, like after diving so deep in the rabbit hole. But how do you distill all that information and use a very interesting way, an engaging way, so that the public and the audience would also be really interested in? And a lot of my work is also on climate and environmental work, which is really important. Like, how do we use our illustrative style or form it in a more creative way so that it will catch audiences' eyes? Because there's just like so much content out there right now, that you have a lot of competition for eyeballs. So I think for the future really is finding innovative ways, like either using, you can go really like into the technology route, like how do we use like AI, VR, whatever, to like make the experience more immersive. Or actually my team breeders were more interested in how to use more like emotionally connective ways to engage our audience. So like we're experimenting like, oh, can we build an entire story out of embroidery or like out of crocheting or like using like more cartoony styles or illustrated styles so that it has that hand feeling. Like I love watercolors, so I built that entire page talking about plants using watercolor illustration, and it really like gives people an idea like, oh, these are personal emotional stories that it's not just like far away places that I don't really know or need to care about. So I feel like, yeah, that's what I would say, like the future of the field, finding creative ways to really engage and catch people's attention to very important and pressing topics in the world. Yeah. Yeah.
It was a pleasure and honor for me to talk with you. Thank you so much, Daisy. Thank you so much. If you want to add anything to wrap up.
Oh, add anything? Well, excited for the conference and everybody should go. So I would, yeah, also love to meet the students and like learn more about what you guys do and learn more about extracellular vesicles too. But yeah, thank you so much. Not electric miracles. Yeah.